Advisory Board. Going to call this meeting to order and ask the clerk to call the roll.
Senator Wheeler.
Present in the room.
Representative Lewis. Representative Lewis. Rocky Adkins. Rocky Adkins. J. Michael Brown. J. Michael Brown. Charles Byers.
I am here.
Jacqueline Coleman. Laurie Dudgeon. Carol Henderson. John Hodgson. John Hodgson. Patsy Jackson.
Present by Zoom.
Holly Johnson. Ryan Neff.
I am here by Zoom.
Mark Overstreet.
Here.
Katie Shepard. Representative McCool.
Here in the room.
Senator Southworth presiding.
Here. Okay, we are still behind on our quorum, so we're going to move out of order in the agenda and remind everyone on Zoom to keep tabs on your mute buttons, as sometimes they like to unmute themselves, it seems, with certain updates. I'll also preview, we have an agenda item at the end of our agenda, but I don't want anyone to miss track of it because some are leaving early, coming late, and so forth. So preview of the meeting schedule, and this will be a little bit different than in years past for those who've been on this committee for a long time. We'll be having our next meeting in September before we approve the final report and make our votes for priorities. Wanted to take some time since we've been all a lot remote this year and haven't been able to spend time discussing. It's been all fire hose intake here. To have what I would compare to a jury deliberation. We'll have a public meeting to where anybody's welcome to hear us discuss what is sticking out to us and how we are thinking as far as making our vote selections for how to prioritize Commonwealth's spending priorities. So that discussion hearing will be our next meeting, and then we will turn in our vote forms after that, and we will conclude our business this year with the following meeting where we'll adopt our final report as a matter of the formal process. But anyway, our staff can cover the details with that later, but I just wanted to put that on everyone's radar so that you're aware, especially if you're leaving early or something before we get to that part. Next item on the out of order agenda, we'll have our staff update on informational items and other reports.
So included in the meeting folders today is one information item that's provided as follow-up to questions that were asked last month during Kentucky State University's discussion of its capital plan. We have representatives here from the university if anyone has any questions on the follow-up information that they've provided. Does anyone have any questions on Kentucky State? Moving on, the next agenda item is a report of an amended capital plan. Actually, there's two capital plan amendments. Two universities have amended their plans since we had our last meeting. Northern Kentucky has added one capital project to the first biennium of the planning period, the Expand Renovate Regents Hall project. It's a $2 million project funded with private funds and other long-term funding. U of L has also amended their capital plan, and they've added one new project to the first biennium, the renovation of the Kentucky Lions Eye Lab project. It's a $7 million restricted fund project. That's all I've had.
Okay, thank you to our wonderful staff. We have with us as our first presentation the Council on Post-Secondary Education, Dr. Thompson Company. If you all will unmute and bring yourselves forward, introduce yourselves for the record, and start in when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair Southworth. I hope you're hearing me well, and committee, good afternoon. I have with me today is Dr. Bill Payne, who's our Chief Financial Officer, and Sean McKiernan, who is our Director of Budget and Finance. And Sean will be running the PowerPoint. I want to start out this conversation by telling you what I tell you almost every year when I come to this group. Our public education folk are doing a pretty good job, and I'll give you a little update here in a second. But, our buildings are not doing so well. And so asset preservation will be our number one item again this year in our budget. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So the two main agenda items that we have for you will be around the post-secondary institutions priorities. That will cover a variety of things, including the capital request. And the second one will be the CPE agency budget, where we'll talk a little bit about what we need in order to move forward. Sean, go to the next slide, please. So next slide, please. So you know who we are. I won't have to go over that with you. We have about 28 million square feet of E&G on our campuses, and we serve more than 193,000 students currently. So I want to tell you just a little bit about what's happened in the last few years. As many of you know, that I've been in this role for 3 years. Before that, with CPE and with Kentucky State University, but I'll just take this moment to brag before we go into the ask. In the last 3 years, we've had the lowest tuition increase in almost 30 years, actually over 20 years. And we're proud of that because we're focusing on affordability. We have made significant progress, one of the largest in the nation from our base, in closing achievement gaps. Our URM degrees are up 40% at our four-year campuses and 39% at our KCTCS campuses. We are also looking at how we can serve the state in job growth, because you all know that the most direct correlation with a good economy that's sustainable is an educated workforce, and higher education is the most direct correlation to that. So our number of STEM-H degrees and credentials have grown significantly, around 30%. And we are also still looking at how we can do the things we need to do with short-term certificates to solve what we need. And with that in mind, I'll just be honest with you, we're also going to look to see the value of those degrees, that they're serving what they need to serve. We also are looking at dual credit, not just as an affordability issue, but how we can make sure that our students are getting ready for college. We have 50% of our our graduating seniors from high school going to college, and we cannot build the workforce we need unless we increase that. So dual credit is a way that we will be looking at helping these students to know that they can do college level work. Next slide, please. Sean, next slide, please. So once again, just give you an idea of kind of where we're at since 1999, where CPE got its, we came into existence in the 97 law, but where we started focusing on the systematic process heavily. Started in 1999. So from 1999 to 2020, we've grown FTE at our KCTCS campuses about 63%, which is obviously very good. Undergraduate FTE has grown 12%. Our university graduate FTE has grown 44%. And, the money our research campuses and others bring in has grown by 194%. Now, we are proud of those numbers because so much of what we've been able to do with our facilities have come through other venues other than a state-supported system. So we wanted to kind of lay that out for you to have a good idea of the base that we're trying to work on and build off of. Now I'm going to let my partners take over here, and I'll come back and answer any sort of questions that you may have of me.
Thank you, President Thompson. This is Bill Payne, Vice President of Finance here at the Council. What this slide is showing you is the level of state investment in post-secondary education facilities between 1998, 2000, and the 2020 through 2022 biennium. The blue bars represent new and expanded space, state expenditures in new and expanded space. The yellow bars are state expenditure for asset preservation and renovation. And the bullets over to the left sum it up. Over the past 24 years, the state has invested $1.7 billion in new and expanded E&G facilities and $514 million for asset preservation projects. So that ratio of spending on new construction to asset preservation is about 3 to 1. Next slide, Sean. We were asked in coming before you today to share a draft 2022-24 capital request. That's what this table is showing you. This draft is very preliminary at this point. It has not been vetted through our institutions or our own CPE board, but was something that was put together by CPE staff. And as Aaron Thompson, President Thompson alluded to, asset preservation is going to be another high priority for CPE in terms of capital investment for this upcoming biennium. As you can see in that first line, at this point in the process, we're anticipating requesting $350 million in the first year of the upcoming biennium, an additional $350 million in the second year, for a total of $700 million in state bond funds for asset preservation. We're still engaged in conversations with the institutions about their new construction needs. But one thing that the COVID-19 pandemic taught us over the past year and a half or so is that our technology infrastructure was woefully inadequate. And so in talking to our institutions and in talking to a committee that Sean McKiernan on my staff formed with some institutional representatives and private sector representatives, technology infrastructure is going to be at the forefront in terms of our priorities as well. But we will continue to have conversations with campus chief budget officers. President Thompson will have conversations with campus presidents. He will also have conversations with our own board members. And so this is likely to change, but we wanted to give you some sense of where CPE staff was at this point in time in terms of the 2022-24 capital request. Next slide, Sean. Just to highlight some of the features of that request, I've already mentioned the $700 million in state funding for asset preservation. But what we are anticipating at this time is that $700 million will be matched with $350 million of institutional funds, so a 50 cents on the dollar match. In terms of the estimated $7.3 billion asset preservation need across our system, the state funds will address about 10% of that system total need. When you add in the $350 million in campus matching funds, it will address just over 14%. So this is really just a drop in the bucket in terms of what our asset preservation needs are across our system. We anticipate recommending a funding pool supported by a list of priority projects, and that pool would be allocated based on each institution's share of system total renovation and renewal need. And you'll see that here in just a moment. Again, we're going to bring a technology infrastructure to the forefront as well with an $80 million request. And Sean is going to talk a little bit more in just a minute about the details with respect to the technology infrastructure. What this table is showing you is a preliminary asset preservation allocation by institution. That first column of numbers is showing the 2013 update to the VFA study, renovation and renewal need by institution and in total. And for the 2017 through 2021 time period, their projections were that there would be a $7.3 billion need if it were not addressed either by the state or the institutions or some combination of the two. That second column of numbers shows the percent of total of that $7.3 billion need. And when you apply those percentages to the preliminary draft $700 million asset preservation request from the state, you can see how that's allocated to each institution. And then in the column to the far right, we show the institutional matching funds totaling the $350 million for that 50 cents on the dollar match. Next slide, Sean. So I think the rationale for this request ought to be very evident at this point. We've talked about it a couple of times already. There is a $7.3 billion asset preservation need in total for the system that the VFA study projected would be reached between 2017 and 2021. And obviously, we're at the upper end of that range in 2021. Since 2008, the state has invested $281 million in asset preservation, or about 3.8% of that total need. I think this next bullet is very important. Additional investment is needed not only to maintain the value of our institutions, these are state-owned assets, but also the functionality. You know, how are those facilities going to serve our students? We need to modernize those facilities and make them functional, but also we need to maintain the safety of those facilities for our students and the faculty that work in those facilities. Modern facilities and systems reduce operating costs and better serve students, obviously. This is another important factor, this last bullet. We went to a couple of different sources, and from what we were able to find online, construction costs over the past 5 or 6 years have been growing at between 3% and 6% per year. So this is the cost of renovation and renewal is only going to continue to grow as we move forward in time. And so that $7.3 billion need today is going to be even larger in the future. This table right here shows projected asset preservation need that was coming out of that VFA study versus state investment between fiscal years 2007 and 2022. On the left-hand side of the page, you can see that the VFA study projections were for 3 different 4-year time periods. And you can see that cumulative asset preservation need growing because it really hasn't been addressed. And that bottom line on the left-hand side of the table shows that in that 2017 to 2021 time period, that projected total asset preservation need would grow to $7.3 billion. And that's essentially where we believe we are today. And one reason for that, as you can see on the right-hand side of the table, is that, you know, over this 7 biennial period, the state investment in asset preservation has been $281 million. And that represents about 3.8% of that projected total need. Next slide, Sean. What you asked CPE staff to do today was to identify capital projects that were the highest priorities of the system. As President Thompson said at the outset, our top priority continues to be for asset preservation funding. And at this particular time in our draft request, we're thinking somewhere in the neighborhood of $700 million, $350 million each year is what we would come forward with in terms of our ask. I've already mentioned that that would be allocated based on each institution's share of total asset preservation need. You also asked us to provide a report identifying capital priorities in the areas of asset preservation, renovation, construction, new and expanded space for E&G facilities and information technology. We've done that as well. But just in terms of the asset preservation projects that are at least partially funded with general fund appropriations, our report includes 69 such projects with a total scope of $1.6 billion. And those are just those asset preservation projects that were included in the first 2-year period of the 6-year capital plan that the institutions submitted. As I think members of the committee know, those projects were initially prioritized by the institutions when they were submitted, but those priorities change as we move forward in time. But at least at the time they submitted their prioritized list, we know what those priorities were. Next slide, Sean. This table shows the total scope of those proposed asset preservation projects for 2022-24. As you can see at the bottom, it's that $1.6 billion figure that I mentioned, 69 projects totaling that number. And you can see the total scope at each institution that adds to that total. At this point, I'm going to hand it off to Sean to talk about our information technology projects. And I'm available to respond to any questions at any time or when we conclude this presentation.
Good afternoon. My name is Sean McKiernan. I'm Director of Budget and Finance at CPE. CPE staff was asked to review information technology projects that were submitted by the institutions. 34 projects were submitted, and the evaluation committee looked at those 34 projects. These projects address network infrastructure, instruction, and information technology administrative needs of the institutions. As we mentioned, staff formed an evaluation committee. It was comprised of 4 members, a CPE Senior Fellow for Technology and Innovation, Dr. Doyle Friskney, Lexington Fayette Government CIO, Aldana Valicenti, a faculty member from the UK College of Medicine, Corey Bungardner, and Mr. Randall Stevens, a technology entrepreneur in the Lexington area. The committee deemed 28 projects to be high value. 4 of these projects were UK healthcare projects, a total of $45 million, and 24 of the 28 high value projects were campus projects, a total of about $135 million for those 24 projects. The high value projects primarily focused on infrastructure needs, but also healthcare and cybersecurity, and the evaluators considered those to be the most important factors when determining which projects were high value. The committee did use a very similar process when looking at the projects that the Commonwealth Office of Technology uses. They looked at both an assessment of risk and an assessment of business value. And the high value projects are those projects that had a higher business value and were lower risk. So those projects that were in that top left quadrant of the schematic on your screen. We have in your report a listing of the high value technology projects, but we've also included the projects in this presentation. There are 8 University of Kentucky university projects, campus projects. There are 4 high value UK healthcare projects. And this slide shows the 6 high value University of Louisville projects. And then finally, we have a list of the comprehensive universities high value projects and the KCTCS high value project. The committee in its report did advocate for a pool of funding, noting that all of the institutions had significant need for technology infrastructure on their campuses. And I believe at this point, I hand it back over to Dr. Thompson to introduce the CPE agency priorities for capital.
Thank you, Sean. We have ways that we think at CPE now that's probably a little bit newer than we've thought in the past. We're focusing heavily on connecting, once again, higher education to the workforce. We're also focused heavily on creating a P20 pipeline to make a lot of that happen. So with that in mind, technology is always on our forefront, and how we can do it more efficiently and more effectively. And so you know our mission and vision, so I won't go over that as much, but I will tell you that a process for us to do what we need to do, we set it deeply into our strategic agenda and our accountability system. You know, we've moved to a performance funding model, and you know, we've moved to a place where we do a lot of assessment and accountability to make sure that our campuses are reaching the particular goals that is beneficial not only to their campus and their community, but also overall to the state. So our duties fall in line here, and we have many more duties than this, but my statement, just to back it up with what's in law, is listed here. Next slide, please. So what we want to think about doing is, as you think about this pipeline process that we need to develop, and we've already started it, obviously, but if you think about those items that started, and Representative McCool is in the audience, as you well know, with the Student Right to Know bill, that we've developed a strong piece of technology that allows a student early to see exactly where he or she can go with the major they choose, how much it's going to cost, how much they'll get paid, the average amount of debt that has been normally in this case. So it also leads to another kind of financial literacy. What we're asking for here, and I'll let Sean go into greater detail here after I present it, is we're asking for a student portal that would be sitting on our website that truly is an active portal that allows students to be able to see how to maneuver from secondary education all the way through to the workforce. We're calling that the student portal. To be honest with you, it's probably going to cost us more than this, but we think we'll be able to make it with this $2 million that is the ask. And we're also going to be looking at upgrading our optical network. And so the 3 million ask is a fairly low ask, I understand, but we believe that this 3 million will give us a great return on investment. Sean, give a little more explanation for these.
Happy to. The first project in our capital request for 2022-24 is the student portal, also known as the College to Career Pathways. This online portal would help students from all backgrounds explore their career options and college costs. The site would also facilitate course and program comparisons across institutions, and it would facilitate the transfer of credits and also credit for prior learning. The $2 million scope is for a project that utilizes a centralized catalog of programs and modules to allow the comparison of courses and degree programs. It would have to interface with campus systems to allow evaluation and seamless transfer of credits. And some more detail on the upgrade to the Kentucky Regional Optical Network infrastructure. This project will fund the equipment needed to connect the public universities and KCTCS to Kentucky Wired, making full use of Kentucky Wired's capabilities. So currently the Regional Optical Network connects the state's post-secondary education community to national and international research through Internet 2. This upgrade will support internet delivery to anchor node sites and would support the Google Community Fiber Initiative, GigU, and Kentucky Community Fiber Initiative as well.
Thank you, Sean. Chair Southworth, that's our presentation. We're happy to take questions from you and the committee.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. I'm going to jump into a question here myself, and we'll open it up here in a minute. I'm on slide number, at least I show it as page 5. I don't know if that's true or not. We're talking about the university undergraduate full-time student count had risen 12%, that slide. And wanting to know, do we have any comparisons with population change in that same general age group or category?
May not be exactly in the way you're asking, but I can generally tell you that college going rate has fallen in Kentucky over the last 5 years significantly. Adult learners are has either aged out or they're not enrolling like they once did. The traditional age population group that are enrolling are staying longer. Our retention rate's up to 80% at our four-year institutions and extremely high at KCTCS. So we're having fewer people come in the front door and more people going out the back door, to answer your question. So the population group, by relative comparison, isn't keeping up coming in, but we're probably doing better going out. Our educational attainment rate has risen in the last 5 years, almost actually more than that. I don't have it in front of me, but 8 or 9 percentage points. So we're doing better student success, but we've got to get more people in the front door from our adult learners, and we've got to get more people in the front door from our traditional learners coming in from high school.
Okay, fantastic. And then I'm on 2 more slides later. You mentioned the asset preservation. You have a number around that with the 700 total. New constructions yet to be determined. Do we have any clue at all where we might land with that? Because I know you mentioned the 3 to 1 ratio before. I started to think you were going to a different ratio, but then I couldn't quite tell. Do we have any clues about where you're going with that?
Bill, what has our campus has told us? Let me state this before Bill answers. We have been pushing heavily. So from CPE, for the last 2 biennia, we've only brought to you the asset preservation as our number one, as the way we're going, and haven't brought to you any new construction, simply because we feel that there's not been enough focus on that. And so I'm sure will get campuses wanting new construction. I'm sure there will be some folks in your community asking for it. So I don't have exactly the total. Bill, do you have any idea what may be coming?
We actually have a chief budget officers meeting scheduled for tomorrow. And as you know, President Thompson, the first inkling that we got was at the last president's meeting, the first Wednesday of this month. And there were 1 or 2 presidents that said, are we going to continue to just move forward with an asset preservation ask, or is there going to be an opportunity for this upcoming biennium to include, for a given campus, to include a new construction project? And so those are conversations that we have not had to this point. But we did want to go ahead and put that line item in this table and list it as to be determined, because we know of at least a couple of institutions that feel like they've got a need. And what President Thompson said to those institutions, those campus presidents at that August meeting, was that he definitely wanted to continue to stress asset preservation, but that he was not opposed to a campus bringing a project, if it is indeed a very high priority project, and they can show a strong rationale for why we need to invest in new construction on a given campus. We're not going to close the door to those conversations. And so we will be having those conversations tomorrow with the chief budget officers. President Thompson will be speaking to the presidents at the September president's meeting. And we likely will have at least 2 or 3 campuses that have a request for some new construction on their campus.
Okay, you're leading right into my next question, which was in your 1.6 billion list here in these projects. I haven't done the line item check, but are any of these the same as the campus priorities, or do you guys pretty much come up with your own priorities and they may or may not? Like, how much does it align similarity with the school requests, and how much is it kind of off on the more umbrella approach of the CPE?
I can answer this question for the committee. The $1.6 billion is the sum of all of the asset preservation projects that were submitted. I believe it was version 3 in the capital planning system that included at least some portion of the project funded with state general fund dollars. So that is that's the explanation behind the projects that go into this list.
And to answer your question more specifically, this aligns directly with the campus ask. None of these are all of them are a desire, right? But not directly coming from CPE.
I guess then I need to adjust that. The 700 million you're asking for, do we have a breakdown of how that compares? Like, would you be taking off the first few of each list here for each campus, or how do you propose the 700 out of the total 1.6?
You're asking for our way of prioritizing to get to the 700. Bill, what's the process we use for that every time?
Well, what we will be recommending is an asset preservation pool, and whatever level of funding would be provided or authorized by the General Assembly, we would apply the percentages based on VFA study needs shown in this table here. And in that third column of numbers with the heading state funding, if we requested and the General Assembly authorized $700 million in asset preservation funding, each campus would receive the allocation that you see on this slide here. And then they would be able to, out of those asset preservation projects that they prioritize that make up that, $1.6 billion total. Obviously, for example, UK identified more than $257 million in their list that is part of that $1.6 billion. They would have to determine which of those projects, you'll go back to the other slide, Sean. So they identified $370 million for the first 2 years of their 6-year capital plan, which would be within that 2022-24 timeframe. Each campus would have to determine which of those projects that comprise the 1.6 billion would be of highest priority and expend those funds from that pool according to their allocation.
Okay, thank you. Another question relating specifically to the CPE request of the student portal. Seamless transfer credits. I like the sound of that, but I want to get a history. Do we currently have something in place that allows or requires credits taken from one of our universities to have to transfer to another? Or what's the look at that right now?
Yes, there was a law passed in 2010 that created a seamless transfer process between our 2-year campuses and our 4-year campuses. And that's worked really well. I mean, there's glitches, but the law says if there's a glitch and they can't resolve it, it comes to me and I can resolve it. But what we also didn't have in there was a 4-year to 4-year as well. So in some cases, there have been different ways of looking at a course offered, whether it's going to be accepted or not. In that case, each campus will take a look at the syllabi, the required prerequisites for that course, and the course equivalencies then would take place to make sure that they are looked at. So as far as seamless goes there, it's probably not as seamless as I would like, but it's one that is workable. The biggest issue we had around this, and I'm proud to say Kentucky was one of the first states to create a seamless way of thinking about course transfer through learning outcomes in 2010, and that's working really well. Once again, Chair, I will tell you there's glitches at different times. And so when they pop up, though, we have a way to solve those glitches.
So as a follow-up on that particular topic, do we need to add 4-year to 4-year to the law that we did in 2010, or is that going to be wrapped in with this system already?
Well, what this system will do literally is allow, and I think this system may actually solve that issue. This would allow students to see if they take a course in one place, what institutions will it be transferred to? And I will promise you, if one institution takes it and another one don't, we'll see almost all of them taking it. So this is really, once again, a full disclosure, transparency issue that allows the student to have a lot of control over his or her way of his or her education. And that's including some credit for prior learning that even goes beyond the transferability. It goes to the idea of competencies that they may have gotten in certain areas that allows us to look at that in a way to evaluate it, so students know how much and how many credits that they will get for those courses or for that life experience.
Awesome. We're going to jump out of order once again from the agenda, and if all the members could refer to the minutes in your packets. And I want it to open the floor to entertain a motion on the minutes. Motion from Senator Wheeler. Second from Representative McCool. Clerk, please call the roll. Oh, I'm sorry. It's a voice vote according to our clerk. So all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. And we will now go back to our agenda item where we were in with questions on CPE. Representative Lewis. Representative Lewis, are you there with your question? Okay, while we're waiting for Representative Lewis, Senator Wheeler has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It makes me feel good to see so much efforts on asset preservation. I think that's very important. I mean, just to be frank, when I went to UK, I always thought the most beautiful buildings on campus have practically been there the longest. The newer ones never did strike my fancy too much. But, you know, I've got a lot of friends in town that are having kids go off to school for the first time and everything, and are frankly coming back and telling stories that they're quite amazed at the luxuries in some of these dorm rooms, like Tempur-Pedic mattresses and things like that. Now, I'm all about, you know, kids having the necessities on campus of a clean place to stay and a safe place to stay and things like that, but you know, given that all the taxpayers' dollars are important, plus the fact I think there's probably a learning experience. I know when I went to college and had to sleep on a set of box springs and a thin mattress, you know, there's something about roughing it that kind of breeds a little bit of camaraderie in things. You know, to what attention is the Council on Post-Secondary Education monitoring some of these, what I might call excessive expenditures by the universities on things like that?
Well, you ask a couple of questions there, and I'll start by saying, if you know, when I was in school, I won't even tell you what I had to deal with.
Yeah.
So that was a long time ago. Well, you know, the money we're asking for, it doesn't go to residence halls. Those residence halls you're referring to are public-private partnerships. This is where they have gone into it with private partners, and that's the way that they're paying for those buildings, because we haven't gotten any money in that area to build residence halls for a long time. So it is luxurious. I'm not going to lie. I've got kids in college. The idea that for many universities and colleges, I spoke at Kentucky State this morning, and where they have a lot of old residence halls that got mold and water coming through and so on. That's why we're going with asset preservation on this one. But the new residence halls are actually a competitive factor, if you will, that campuses are telling us that everybody has, and students are asking for that. Parents are asking for that. So, but in this case, we're not asking for money from the state to supply for that particular group in that case. The money we are asking is designed to set up a good technology infrastructure, but in this case, not for residence halls.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Did Representative Lewis show back up unmuted? Okay, we'll pause on Representative Lewis. Representative McCool has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. President Thompson, I'm with you. I go back a long way. We're lucky we had beds back in the day, wasn't it?
I actually, the first semester, I did not have a bed. There was 3 to a dorm, and I slept on a little cot, believe it or not, my first semester. So I'm there with you.
Makes you appreciate one today, though, doesn't it?
It sure does.
But anyway, I appreciate your all's time today, and certainly I appreciate you mentioned about the students' access to all the technology and open access to all serving between the universities as well. Right to know that you mentioned about. I think it's going to be very valuable. But I want to ask about the technology. Technology is always going to be a need, always, especially after what we've been going through. But I was just curious, and I don't know if this plays into it or not, but at one time I know with the Kentucky Wire, the broadband, they was putting hubs on the college campuses. Is that helping, or has that had any impact on reducing the cost of infrastructure increase or not?
It indeed has, tremendously, as a matter of fact. I appreciate the question. And it has helped tremendously to a degree. What we saw this last time with COVID, the digital divide was even wider than we thought. So even we provided access in many cases. What we didn't provide was the what I call the capacity. So many of these students, although had access with dad and mom at home working and students downloading their stuff, it just wasn't enough upload and download speeds. So much of the way we have to think about this now in the digital divide is about not just having access to it, but the usability of it. So a part of this K-RON piece, obviously, is to go to increase fiber and download and upload speed. So, but yes, I couldn't imagine having this conversation with you 10 years ago. Well, I did probably, as I think about it, but it's a long way from there, tremendously.
Thank you.
Okay, Representative Lewis can't be heard, so I'm going to read his question.
Actually, Madam Chair,
you're back up.
Finding the link that works, so we're good.
Go for it.
Sorry. But thank you, Madam Chair. Always good to see a native Clay Countyan, President Thompson. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
I just had one quick question, and going through your slideshow, I do see that there is emphasis being placed on cybersecurity. But as we're going forward, and I know this has been a lot of conversations on the insurance side of things, but every day you're seeing ransomware come up and different companies, literally being, held at gunpoint for access to their systems. Going forward, the next, 10, 20 years, cybersecurity, what are you all thinking, and what steps are you taking to protect our systems?
Excellent question, and I can't answer all of that. What I will answer that I know, and I'll give you an example. What I know is you're absolutely right. You're hitting the nail on the head. I mean, everything can be hacked now, and there are people in business just to hack and charge ransoms, and it's cheaper in many cases to pay them. So this has become an illegitimate business that many bigger folk are getting involved in, which is scary. So that tells you the corporatization of this is exactly where your question's leading to. Our campuses obviously are working on this. I don't have the answer to how much or what I know or what I don't know. We approve new programs all the time that are cutting edge that focuses on cybersecurity. I can tell you that we've approved several this past year. The other item I will add as an example, I'm the chair of the board of Baptist Health, Corporate Baptist Health. And healthcare is a prime example of what you're talking about. Even though we're talking education here, there's not a whole lot of, all these things are connected. And somehow we've got to, as an education body, as the people who create R&D, as the people who are the creators, if you want to call it that, of good outcomes toward things like this, we're going to have to double down on how to stay ahead of this game that is being played on us. And I'm sure I'm not answering all your questions because I don't know exactly the answer to the piece of it, but that is what I do know.
Thank you, President Thompson. Thank you. Always good to see you. Thank
Always
you,
good to see you, sir.
Do we have any other members with any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Dr. Thompson and team, for your work and presentation. We are ready for our next presenters, the Court of Justice. They'll come forward.
Good to see everybody. I'll
Thank
talk
you.
to you soon.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Kentucky Court of Justice presenters, if you could introduce yourselves for the record and proceed with your presentation.
My name's Danny Rhodes. I'm the Executive Officer of the Department of Court Facilities at the Administrative Office of the Courts.
Do you have anyone visiting with you?
Looks like we have Charles Byers on. I don't know if he wants to go ahead and introduce himself.
Go ahead and proceed with your presentation, and he can introduce himself if he speaks up at a certain point.
All right. I don't have anything to show. I do want to just bring you all up to speed. The project that we are requesting for the Capital Construction Division at the Administrative Office of the Courts in the 2022 budget will be Leslie County. That is we are anticipating a 24,000 square foot program need for that facility. We currently have approximately 8,000 square feet that we are occupying in the Leslie County Courthouse. In early 2021, the Administrative Office of the Court asked GRW architects and engineers to do an assessment of what we deemed the 37 greatest needed assessments to counties throughout the state. Leslie County was one of those, and that is what we have deemed as the greatest need based on the assessment. 12 assessments have been completed. We still have 25 that are to be completed before May 2022.
Okay, is there anything else you wanted to add, or do you want to take questions from here?
I can take questions at this time.
Okay, Senator Wheeler has a question.
Yeah. I applaud the focus on getting some new courtroom facilities as a practicing attorney in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And, I'm not going to necessarily question the need for some courthouses in throughout areas that have traditionally been underserved in the past. But, I know on several of these that have been done. In fact, I was supposed to have a jury trial in Pike County this week. They built a magnificent courthouse there. I mean, it's enormous. One of the things we ran into with COVID, we're having to have more people appear remotely. I had a witness that worked in a COVID ward that we needed to try to get on the screen from afar. And even though there was a juror box with about 20 monitors there, guess what? It wasn't working. And the internet was not stable. And I actually talked to the circuit clerk's sister who I went to high school with, and she said there's all kinds of problems with that building, which is relatively new. I think it was maybe opened in 2010, and I know in Lawrence County, which is also part of my district, there's been a lot of problems with that new building. Again, very beautiful building. I like the architectural style, but I've heard there's been some persistent quality control problems. What's the Administrative Office of the Courts done to try to get this under control, and how can we be assured that these future projects won't have a lot of the same problems the more recent projects have had?
And I appreciate your identifying those issues. We ourselves have also looked at ways to, work through some of those issues that we've that have come up. One of the items that we are focusing on is looking at materials and equipment that is more easily maintainable by local maintenance staff. We do rely on the counties to as the Public Properties Corporation and the Fiscal Court are the owners of these facilities. We rely on the counties to provide personnel to provide maintenance. We also are looking at more across the board preventative maintenance schedules and contracts, so that we do have qualified personnel, whether it's a contractor or a local provider that comes in and does quarterly or biannual maintenance on the lighting, the HVAC, anything related to the equipment itself. But it does
start you there just a second, since you brought up an interesting point in your answer there. I think one of the things that they have mentioned is that they had just decided that even though they had all these individual screens that they paid for and installed in the boxes, that it would probably be more proper to have one large screen on a cart, and they have brought that there, but it had been sitting in a box, I think, for around 3 weeks, because even though they had somebody on their staff who was recently hired as a technology coordinator for the local school system, but before he left, he was willing to install that and set that up. He couldn't do anything without I guess a green slip or a green light from the AOC, and that has to go through a pretty substantial process. Apparently they'd had him do some work previously independently, and he was chastised for that. So or they were chastised for that, I guess, the office. So the picture I got from speaking to them, as not only as their senator but as a practicing attorney, was a lot of bureaucratic mess and quality control, and that was a great concern for me.
I'm going to ask Charles Byers. Charles is over our ITS department, and he can, I think, speak to our audio video in the courtroom.
Yeah, thank you, Danny. Thank you, Senator. I appreciate the question. Pike County is one I'm working on it even this morning. The internet service provider that they have there is Suddenlink. And one of the challenges that we have is that we try to provide the maximum amount of bandwidth available, very similar to what we heard in the university context. And especially as it relates to video conferencing, those transactions are very bandwidth intensive, but we're limited to the carriers that are available in that space. And so we're always evaluating different carriers and looking for the best ways to hook that up. The jury rail monitors are part of that JAVS system, and that's a vendor solution that we have for the inside the courtroom system. It's a very complicated proprietary integrated system. So when we do things like Zoom or Microsoft Teams meetings, where we have to try to figure out how to integrate those things together, they were never really designed to work together in that regard. Much like this meeting, it took some effort, I'm sure, by LRC staff to figure out a way to make this work. And so we are actively working on that. In terms of the large monitor that was there and why it's not hooked up, I don't have an answer for that. I would have to look into it. My guess would be that our vendor shipped it out there and is working to dispatch someone to come out, but they are overrun with COVID concerns, just like every organization. And I apologize for the inconvenience, but I'll make sure that we follow up on that.
Is there a prohibition on, people within the office that might have the skills to do these things from actually kind of doing it on a local level?
Well, yes, because well-meaning folks make a mess out of this stuff each and every day. And so we will spend more time after this pandemic finally lets up going back out into these courtrooms and reconfiguring those, because once they start to mess with it, it compromises the integrity of that court record. Because as you know, we don't have court reporters in Kentucky. And so that audio video recording is the official record of the court. So we do take it very seriously, and some people may think we're overly protective of it, but it's a really bad thing when a case goes up on appeal and there's something wrong with the record because a well-intentioned person tried to hook something up.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Lewis is going to make our next question or comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a comment. I'd like to echo the sentiments of my friend and colleague, Senator Wheeler. We want to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars. And, when I first got elected to office, one of the first people to reach out to me was the county attorney and some of the judges and talking about, really the disrepair and other facilities in Leslie County, which is one of the counties that I represent. But yeah, I just want to thank you all for, being attentive to the needs of the people of Leslie County. It certainly does not go unnoticed and certainly needed. So thank you very much. And that's all I got. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, do we have other questions pending? While we're looking at that, I have a question. So we talked about that current judicial facility includes 8,000 square feet, and this new one projected would be 24,000 square feet. And this study or whatever it was is going to meet the needs of the judicial branch for 50 years. So what is involved in that study to determine that the judicial branch, when the technology is creating more remote work now, is actually going to increase 300%?
So I will add that the court program, the building program that we develop that requires so much square footage for courtrooms, so much square footage for office space related to that, space for our drug court pretrial CDW offices, the circuit clerk, all of that since the late 2000s has been reevaluated. We have looked at ways to reduce square footages in buildings that we feel like there were spaces that were unutilized or could be utilized as common areas. So the 24,000 square foot that has been proposed for this judicial facility does include space for all of our court functions within that space, and it reduces the size of the courtrooms, not substantially, but where we feel like with technology improvements that the courtroom can function with the reduction of those square footages, but also reduces the amount of conference rooms to create shared conference rooms. But we do feel like, based on the assessment, that the amount of space that we currently occupy in Leslie County is very inadequate.
Okay, I didn't quite catch it. So the 24,000 square foot is the reduced version and there was a higher number? Or that is the high number and you're reducing it from the 24?
It based off of facilities that we constructed in the late 2000s, that is a reduced square foot. A comparable program, from projects that were authorized in 2006 and 2008, probably would have been around 33,000 square foot for a facility in this area.
Okay, so going back to several years ago, in discussing these projects in other counties, we heard testimony relating to how much growth there would be projected for the next umpteen years. And that's why they needed to build about 50% extra now so they could grow later. How much of this is growth pattern and how much of this is a wider hallway and so it takes more square footage, and how much of this is actually we're going to be using this space tomorrow?
Yeah, well, I would say that we're still consistent with the 50% growth pattern. There are other areas that are required in this facility that we may not have in Leslie County. We've got space for, security queuing, security monitoring, holding cells, throughout the facility for each courtroom, Sally Port area, the circulation paths for not only the general public, but also court staff and the prisoner transfer through the building. All of those are separated and do not cross at any time. So that is part of the the circulation of the building is part of the reason for the square footage.
Okay, so going back to the cost, this is in our capital request for $15 million.
Yes.
And it says the annual general fund use allowance is $1.2 million. So are you suggesting that the total cost of this project is $15 million and that is going to be on top of, in addition to, or inclusive of general fund use allowance, and or will there be any costs to the locals at a certain point in time?
No, the use allowance, these projects, when we construct them, we work with the counties to, they will be the ultimate owner of the building. But these projects bonds are sold locally, and that spread out through a 20-year bond issuance.
Do we have any indication from the local governments in Leslie County if they handle $15 million capacity for their bond issuance?
On these projects, we haven't had an issue with that. It doesn't go toward their bond capacity. When we set the Public Properties Corporation up, because these are backed by the authorization to the judicial budget, there hasn't been any indication that this would go against what their bonding capacity would be.
Okay, and then going back to the 50% calculation that's probably been in place for a number of years. I feel like last year, this year, we're using more remote work, remote witnesses we just heard about. Does remote take more space or less space, and are we going to be adjusting in any way, shape, or form for our calculations moving forward with those type of things coming in more and more?
So I think there will be adjustments moving forward, but a lot of what we're doing, a lot of what we're moving to are, I believe hybrid proceedings, where you might not have as many spectators in the courtroom, but you do have, possible litigants or attorneys and judges staff and clerk staff in there. I could let Charles speak to this, but on recent facilities, we are making provisions in a lot of our conference rooms to include large monitors and video capability for those, so that you can use, conference rooms instead of courtrooms for the, virtual proceedings. But at this time, we haven't made any adjustments related to, the possibility of all virtual proceedings or, anything of that nature.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions? All good? All right. Well, thank you so much for your presentation. Next on our agenda is the Cabinet for Economic Development. Katie Smith, welcome, and please unmute and proceed with your presentation.
Great. First, can you all see the presentation? I just want to confirm you can see it.
We can see your entire screen. It's not on slideshow view. Now we're on presenter. We're on presenter view now.
Okay. Bear with me.
We're now on an extended screen. There we go. We now have your entire show.
All right. Whew, technology, love it. Thank you. My name is Katie Smith. I'm the Commissioner of the Department for Financial Services here at the Cabinet for Economic Development, and I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity today to present our capital plan request to you. So before I get into that, I want to give you a little bit of background on who we are and kind of what we do. So our cabinet is governed by the Kentucky Economic Development Partnership Board, and that's a 13-member board comprised of 8 private sector members, 4 cabinet secretaries, and it's chaired by the governor. And this board oversees the work that is accomplished by our cabinet. Our cabinet currently consists of the Office of the Secretary, the Department for Business Development, the Department for Financial Services, the Office of Entrepreneurship and Small Business Innovation, Office of Marketing and Public Affairs, and the Office of Legal Services. Additionally, we have 3 other boards that are attached to the cabinet. First is our Kentucky Economic Development Finance Authority, which we call KEDFA, and they're the primary board that authorizes the majority of our tax incentive programs and various incentive programs that we recommend and have approved through that board. Additionally, we have a Bluegrass State Skills Corporation board that handles, we have a couple of workforce training programs. And then finally, we have a Commission on Small Business Advocacy and Innovation board. Currently, we have 63 employees, and our main office is located here in Frankfort in the old Capitol Annex. We do also have a couple of foreign contracts representation. One is in Germany, in Hamburg, and he covers kind of the Europe area. And then the other is in Tokyo, Japan. And our cabinet is the primary state government agency that is responsible for encouraging job creation, business retention, and new corporate investment here in Kentucky. Our cabinet offers various programs and services to assist companies that are considering location, expansion, and retention projects here in Kentucky. Our project management team does pride itself on customer service that it offers to assist projects, and we strive to meet with projects so that we can understand their needs and provide assistance. In doing so, we also collaborate across other state agencies so we can address the questions raised by the projects and their requests. Some of the services that we offer involve evaluations of sites and buildings, providing detailed community data, connecting projects with the correct resource or expert on a certain topic or matter, educating companies on the incentive programs and training programs that may be available, workforce services, and advocacy. Some of the programs that we provide involve certifying if a site is what we consider build ready. We also provide an online searchable database that lists all of the available sites and buildings across Kentucky, and it's located at selectkentucky.com. We work with work-ready communities, the Product Development Initiative, as well as opportunity zones. And additionally, we have several tax incentive programs that are available that we use to negotiate the location of new projects or expansion of existing projects, as well as retention of our existing industry as well. Year to date in 2021, we've been very excited to announce over 60 new location and expansion projects, investing over $2.6 billion and creating over 5,500 full-time jobs, paying an average hourly wage of $23.47. We're very happy to report that the announced investment so far this year has already surpassed our total investment of $2.2 billion for calendar year 2020, and our wages are currently also higher than the wages from last year as well. So economic development incentives are used in negotiations to attract various economic development opportunities. Incentive programs assist in lowering the cost of doing business in a state, and they are necessary to compete with all of the other states because all of the other 49 states have the incentive programs and offer them as well. Historically, tax incentive programs have been used by us and by other states to compete for potential projects, but more projects that we're now working with are requesting assistance more in the form of cash. So our capital plan request is similar to our previous request in the past. It asks for an increase of funds for 3 of our cash programs that we use to attract different projects across Kentucky. Those programs are listed here. There are KEDFA loans and grants, our high-tech investment and construction pool, and our economic development fund projects. Funds awarded under all of these programs are in the form of either a loan, forgivable loan, or a grant, and the applicant must make a commitment to create or retain a certain number of new or existing jobs. And projects may also be required to pay a certain level of wages to employees, maintain a certain level of payroll, or make a certain level of investment as well. The process for each of the programs is very similar. Applications are required to be submitted along with any additional documentation that the project managers may need in order to do due diligence in order to determine that the projects qualify and are eligible for each of the programs. Negotiations with the applicants then occur, and incentive amounts and any job, wage, investment, or collateral requirements are then recommended by management. For the high-tech pool projects, they are recommended from the Executive Director of the Office of Entrepreneurship and Small Business Innovation. EDF projects require the recommendation of our Cabinet Secretary, as well as the concurrence from the Finance Cabinet Secretary as well. And then the KEDFA projects require the recommendation from either our Deputy Commissioner or Commissioner of our Department for Business Development. These projects are then presented to KEDFA for approval. The EDF projects do have 2 additional approvals, one from the State Property and Buildings Commission and the others from the Capital Projects and Bond Oversight Committee. And then any high-tech pool project over $1 million is also required to be reported to the Capital Projects and Bond Oversight Committee. After approval, our staff then monitor the agreements to verify compliance, and our grant and forgivable loan agreements do contain payback provisions should a project fail to meet any of the requirements that are outlined in the incentive agreements. Since 2005, the General Assembly has previously authorized a total of $183.25 million for all of the programs. Projects have been approved and dispersed from these authorizations, and approximately $19.87 million was available for us to use for future projects as of June 30th of this year. So our cabinet plan request totals $60 million over the next biennium, and it consists of $20 million for each of the 3 programs that I've discussed. Over the life of each of these programs, many Kentucky companies have received funding and assistance to locate new facilities, expand existing operations, or retain existing facilities here in Kentucky. And the future of each of these programs is critical to continue the success of attracting new businesses to Kentucky, as well as keeping existing businesses and expansion of them as well. I do want to point out that other states do have privatized funds and large pools of cash that are available for projects. And sometimes we don't want to use the cash, but we have to prove that we have access to the cash and funds for a project just to even be considered at the beginning stages of a project. Additionally, other states are competitive and they will speak negative about Kentucky if we do not have cash available for potential projects. We do need to have the flexibility to work with potential projects to develop the most efficient incentive packages necessary to win projects for Kentucky. So we please ask you to consider our request for additional funds for our programs. Now, I do want to end with a recent success story from one of our EDF projects. So we do continue to hear from our projects that more grade A sites and buildings are needed to be available so companies can compete or so they can complete their projects and investments quicker so they can get to market fast. And one advantage that we do promote for Kentucky is that we work with companies so that they can get speed to market as quickly as possible. In 2019, the Kentucky Association for Economic Development hired a site selection consultant that worked with communities across Kentucky to apply for potential infrastructure improvements regarding sites and buildings in their areas. After those consultants reviewed the projects, the cabinet then considered some of them for requests for potential grant funding under our EDF program. In 2020, the cabinet did recommend and KEDFA approved projects across 8 communities to invest nearly $3 million in infrastructure improvements. One of these projects was in Henderson, and it involved a $175,000 matching grant that extended a gas line to a site that was along Highway 425 bypass. And I am proud to report to you today that the site is no longer available. At the end of July, the company did announce that Pratt Industries is going to open a new paper mill, which will be investing over $400 million to create 321 full-time jobs, paying average hourly wages of $39, including benefits. And on this slide, you'll see pictures from the announcement that day back in July, as well as an ad that the company actually took out themselves in the Wall Street Journal announcing their new project that will be locating in Henderson. I continue to talk to company representatives since the announcement because we're continuing to work with them. And I do want to point out that one of the individuals involved in the decision confirmed with me that having that site shovel ready was a must and was definitely involved in their decision-making process. He mentioned that there's several 200+ acre sites across the country, but companies need to have the utilities already in place so they don't have to wait months or years for that infrastructure to be there. So that's all I have today. I'm happy to address any questions that you may have.
Do we have any questions from members? I'm going to ask one question related to the totals here. It looks like my understanding is that we're dealing with a pool of money. $183 million has been appropriated thus far, and all of it is hanging out there or has been forgiven or whatever, to the point that we're down to 19 million working dollars right now. Is that accurate?
That is correct. We have approved and authorized, and we've utilized funds for grants and loans and forgivable loans. And so we do have $19 that is available for us. We do have some projects that are commitments, so they haven't received approval yet, but the majority of those funds have been used, and so we do only have $19 million available. Again, that was as of the end of June, and I believe that is still the case today.
So is this a pool that this money is just going out, or is some of it end up getting repaid, and or of course whenever they don't reach their goals, some of it doesn't end up going out the door? Is it a pool, or is it more just one directional, it's always leaving, and so you're asking basically for reinfusion?
So and for some of the loans, they are a pool where money gets come back and gets recycled, and then we reuse for additional loans. And so we've been doing that. But then on others, for how we've structured some of the grants, is that they're more performance based. So we don't get collateral up front. We wait until they perform. And if they don't perform, we reduce the disbursement and payment. So the amount that actually is then paid out, we get to not pay it out and then have to have the company repay a portion of it back. We only pay out the amount that they've truly earned, if that makes sense.
No, that does make sense. What I guess want to try to figure out is, do we have any idea how much of this is repayable that'll come back to us to add to the 19 if all goes as planned?
That we don't ever know, because we don't know if it's going to be a grant where we actually give them a performance-based grant, or if it's going to be structured as a loan. We don't know kind of what projects or what type of funding may be requested. So I don't know if all of that 19 million. I will say the most request is for a grant or a forgivable loan that they have to perform. But we have had a few loans over the years, but I will say that the loan program is not really the more popular program. The grant program is the more popular program.
Currently, and looking backwards, how many loans are hanging out there that will come back to us eventually?
We have roughly, I believe, around 15 to 20 loans that are still out there. Now, one of them has the potential for the legislature to forgive, because it was the acquisition of a mega site in Glendale. So I don't know for sure if those funds will come back, but because there is the potential for that. But all of the other loans are repaying, and I don't remember the balance outstanding that we have for that. Maybe roughly around 10 to 12 million on those others. I could be wrong on that though, the balance outstanding.
Okay, that's close enough. At least gives us an idea. Does anybody else have any other questions? Okie doke. Well, thank you so much, Commissioner. Good to see you again.
All right.
And we will move forward to Department for Local Government. Welcome. You may introduce yourself for the record and proceed with your presentation.
Good afternoon. My name is Billy Johnson. I'm the Executive Director for the Office of Federal and State Grants at DLG. We also have with us today Laura Redmond, who is our budget manager. And I will probably go ahead and turn this over to Aaron Jones. He is our program manager that manages our flood program, which is what we're here to talk about today. Thank you.
Can everyone see my PowerPoint?
Yes, you're back.
Can you see me, or can you see the PowerPoint as well?
We're looking at you.
Okay.
Are you sharing your screen on Zoom? There we go.
There we go.
Perfect. You're ready to go.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. Madam Chair and the committee, good afternoon. My name is Aaron Jones, local government advisor for the Department for Local Government, and I have administered the flood control local match participation program for approximately the past 6 years. So per DLG's funding request, just wanted to provide a general overview of the local match participation program and basically the purpose it serves for our local communities, and kind of give you an idea on the return on investment for the Commonwealth. So the local match program basically just provides the necessary funds for the local communities to fulfill their cost share requirements for federally funded flood mitigation projects. I've listed on here traditional projects and non-traditional projects per the statute, the way it's laid out. Your traditional projects, so when this program was first created, were more geared towards the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and FEMA, and basically what we consider a traditional project is when you have a specific match percentage that the federal agency or sponsor, particularly the Corps of Engineers and FEMA, they set that standard right at the beginning of the project when working with local communities. Now, later, I believe the program was expanded to what I would consider more non-traditional flood mitigation projects. And basically, this is when the federal sponsor of the project may have just a fixed amount of funding to offer for the project to whomever the local community is. And then they kind of leave it up to the local community to basically go out and either put up the money themselves or find other funding sources to fill those remaining funding gaps. So here is funding information that basically dates back approximately over the last decade, from 2010 to 2019. 2019 is actually when the program ran out of funds. But the way I broke this down here is, again, there's that word traditional. You have your traditional U.S. Army Corps of Engineers 202 projects. I don't know if you're familiar with those or not. Basically, this this program administered by DLG was solely kind of created to help fund these specific projects. These projects are what I would consider what the Commonwealth gets the biggest bang on their buck. So I did the numbers separately for these, so you can see that over that 10-year period, or approximately 10-year period, the local match participation program spent a little over $3.2 billion in state funds. And just through the Army Corps of Engineers 202 projects, we, or the Commonwealth, received approximately a little over $64 million. Then for the non-traditional projects, the local match participation program spent approximately over $4.8 billion and received $22.3 million in federal funds. So you add that, both those type traditional, non-traditional projects together, basically for a grand total of the local match participation program providing a little over $8.1 billion, and the Commonwealth received a total of $86,961,000. So that's a pretty good return on investment there. If you're wondering the types of flood mitigation projects that we help fund, I made a list here of structural and non-structural projects. I know due to time constraints, I'm not going to sit here and go read through each one of these, but that just gives you an idea of the actual kind of scopes of work that we are assisting the local communities to pay for. Next is our matching process. The one main guideline that Department for Local Government requires is that the applicant, being the local community, they must secure funding by a federal agency or a federal sponsor. I'll explain the difference there in just a minute. So again, I'm kind of touching back on the traditional match. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, typically, their 202 projects they put up 95% of the funding and require a 5% funding from the local community. And then FEMA, on average, their projects are, they put up 70% and require a 30% match. On to the non-traditional match again. The federal sponsor, when they request an amount, it may vary depending on the project or the project scope. So why we label this as kind of a non-traditional match is their match may not be a specific percentage that they're asking for. You could have a federal agency go to a county and say, hey, look, we support your project. We have limited funds. We could give you $50,000 for this project. The total project cost is going to be $100,000. So it's up to you, the county or the city, to come up with those funding gaps or find other sources of funding. So I guess my point being is the project doesn't necessarily always have to be a percentage match. One rule of thumb is DLG will not fund more than 50% of the total project. And that is just simply because we just don't have enough money to do that. The sole purpose of this program that DLG provides is to simply help the local communities with their cost share requirements that the federal agency or the federal sponsor has requested of them. And that's why we want to provide these funds, is because a lot of times for a lot of local communities who don't have the funds to put up for the cost share requirements, they could lose out on tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe even sometimes $1 million or more if you're getting into 202 projects with the Army Corps of Engineer. They could miss out on a lot of federal funding if these funds are not available for them to use as their local match. Excuse me. Below is just some examples of the federal agencies that we deal with the majority of the time. I won't sit here and read all these off. I did want to explain what the difference between the requirement of having a federal agency or federal sponsored funding is. We also accept projects that may, let's say the county or the city receives funding from Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, who receives federal funds, or Kentucky Emergency Management may provide funding for a project, and they also receive funds through FEMA. Basically, the point is Division of Water, they also receive funds through FEMA. So it doesn't necessarily have to be, the funds don't necessarily have to come straight directly from a federal agency to qualify. They just simply need a funding agency that is providing money that has a federal identity. Application process. This is pretty straightforward. There's really no off season to flood mitigation in the Commonwealth. So we receive applications year round. Eligible applicants, cities, counties, sometimes we may receive joint applications. If the city within a county, they both have a vested interest in a flood mitigation project, or you might have multiple counties submit an application that border each other, and they may all have a common interest in a flood mitigation project. Either way, the way we look at it, the more communities involved, and the more money involved, that to us is, it's a bigger bang on the buck. Documentation required. Obviously, application has to be submitted to DLG. An authorizing resolution authorizing the local community to submit the application and apply for the funds from DLG. And then DLG, we also require a copy of the executed legally binding agreement that the local community has with the federal sponsor. If they don't have that at the time that they are submitting the application, we do accept letters of support or commitment letters from the federal agencies. We don't mind to go ahead and get the ball rolling, but DLG does not disperse any of the local match participation funds until we receive a copy of the executed agreement between the local community and the federal agency or federal sponsor. Of course, applications can be found on DLG's website. So for fiscal year 22, here's a list of projects, applications that we have already received. So you have Ohio County. This would be a non-traditional project. The USGS provided $43,500, and then Ohio County Emergency Management, they came up with they matched that with $43,500 for a total of $87,000, which would fund half of the project. In order to complete the project, they needed another $87,000. Here's a good example of how you have a joint application where a city and a city in the county both have common interest in the project and will both benefit. Basically, the U.S. This is also a non-traditional project. U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, they were able to come up with $80,000 for this project, and they needed another $80,000 for a total of $160,000 to complete the project. So they have submitted that application to fulfill that 50-50 match.
Could you read us off? Could you read us off a total of how much total funds you have in active projects? Because the screen's kind of small and we can't see good. Or perhaps
sorry.
the individual numbers, if that's helpful.
Okay. Well, that's what I'm going through right now. Ohio County has requested $87,000. City of Liberty has requested $80,000. Floyd County, they have two projects. This is what's called your traditional projects because this is the actual percentage match. For both of these projects, each of their acquisition, property acquisition projects, FEMA is putting up $496,113 for each of these. So basically, approximately $1 million. And the only match required by the state for one project, Bucks Branch acquisition, is $48,888. And then for the Ivel acquisition, they requested $35,828. And again, if you are to compare that to FEMA, it's putting $496,000 each to both of these projects. Lastly, Hardin County has submitted a multi-county application. Breckenridge County, Meade County, Hancock County are all going to benefit from this project, along with Hardin County. FEMA and USGS is involved in this project, and Hardin County, along with their co-applicants, have requested $253,000 for LiDAR acquisition elevation data. So that's just an update of the actual applications that DLG has received since the beginning of fiscal year 22. Now, the next slide, we have not received an application yet for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers 202 projects that are ongoing projects that will last for many, many years. But considering that we ran out of funds in 2019, so there was a year gap there where no fundings were available. This is the projected amounts that they think they will be submitting and requesting to complete their next phase of their 202 projects over the next fiscal year. And that's the presentation. If you have any questions.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify. We currently have, it seems like $6 million in bond funds, and you're requesting general funds $6 million for the next several biennia. So that would just be building on what we just did, except for general funds versus bonds. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes, I believe so. Laura, would you like to follow up with that?
Yes. So we only requested the $6 million from the capital projects funds. The impact on the general fund was really more of the debt service portion of it.
Okay, thank you. Do any other members have questions? Do we have a copy of this PowerPoint already sent to our staff?
I believe I sent it to Sean Bowman, but I can send it to anyone else that
Sean Bowen.
would like. Bowen.
It's a great. Did you send it today or a different day?
Today.
Today? Okay.
Right.
We'll check on that and get that distributed to members. Anything else? All right. Thank you all so much. As a reminder, I'm going to have staff go over this a little bit more, but we have these sheets that are going to be distributed with an overview every single project in these different categories that we've looked at the last 4 meetings. And we're going to end up basically taking a vote on key things that need to be prioritized in the next budget. And so because these priorities, we haven't had a time to interact with each other, and in the past these have been done more secretly, I think it's important that we offer to the public an explanation for what we're thinking when we make decisions, why we're thinking it. And certainly members don't have to divulge every vote that they're taking if they don't want to, but I do want to open it up. Next meeting, we'll have our meeting be a time for us to discuss. So when staff sends this out, I want to ask all of our members to kind of pick out what you think, where you might be leaning. You don't necessarily have to have your final votes in by the next meeting, but we can discuss those so we can each maybe share highlights and points with the diverse viewpoints that we all have from the different agencies and the public and so forth, all the members of this very diverse board. So we can discuss that at the next meeting, and then we can actually get our votes in following that. So with that, I will turn it over to staff to explain how we're doing all this.
So part of the planning process also involves selecting projects that the members would like to see highlighted in a separate section of the capital plan for funding consideration by the General Assembly. So what the projects are for the first biennium of the planning period, and they encompass state general fund projects only. What we've done is we have sorted all the projects in 3 separate categories. We put them into Excel worksheets for you. Their categories are new construction, maintenance and renovation, and information technology. So you have the option to select up to 15 projects in each of those categories. So after today's meeting, we will make sure to mail you the worksheets to complete your selections. We'll send you the instructions for completing the selections, and we'll also send you a link to the project listings. So if you want to go back and refer to the listings online, because there's so many projects to choose from, you'll have the option to do that too. So if you return your selections to us no later than September the 22nd, we will have everything available for you at the October meeting for review.
Thank you. So our next meeting will be September 15th, 1 p.m. here again, and we will use that time to review our preliminary selections for key items to highlight in this plan. Co-Chair Cool and I have had a few discussions, but obviously in light of the fact that most of our members are on Zoom, we wanted to have that discussion with all of our members together. And so we will have that discussion in open forum, September 15th, 1 p.m. So if there is no other business, I'll move to adjourn, and without objection, we will be adjourned.
Yeah, he probably did. I know he didn't send it. You had it here for us. Any question about that? Senator, thank you. Great job, as always. John, thank you. You always do a great job too.
Yes, you guys are really agile. Do we have a quorum? You have no idea. Quick.
By the end, we had lost most members. I wonder.
That's what I was concerned about.
Those who endured to the end gets a free hot dog. Tell Philip he missed out.
Oh my goodness.